Okay, so we're continuing on in this amazing book, The Parenting Manual, The Peaceful Solution, The Hands-On Approach. Now, last time when we talked, I talked about how I went to a meeting when I was younger and was taught some very important things as a mother-to-be. But I have to tell you, with all that laid a great foundation, but it wasn't until I got involved in the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program, thank you, that I really had a foundation in which to teach my children. It was that foundation that we laid that foundation, and you know what? Even as a parent, if you stepped outside of it, your children still knew that foundation, and they were there to say, now, didn't we just learn? Isn't this what we're supposed to do? And that will help you as a parent know that you're really doing it right, because when you teach your children something diligently, they stick to it, and they'll hold you accountable to it too. So it's a really great program. There's nothing out there that is as solid a foundation as the Peaceful Solution. So I think we should just give the author, Israel Hawkins, a great round of applause, because without him having the insight and the need in today's generation, we would never have this foundation for our children and for ourselves too. We know for ourselves too, because we had to have it so we could teach it to our children. So we're picking up, just going to rehearse just a few things we learned last week. Page 26. Page 26, within that first paragraph, it talked about shaping. We are shaped, our morality is shaped by our parents, that last line there in that first paragraph, by our parents and our experiences. And in the character unit on page 4, you can write that down. That was the G-phasis, that what we're going to talk about. Now we know that G stood for goals, and F stood for fun time, and I stood for interest, and E, eating preferences. C for clothing? No. E for entertainment? No. I have my first overhead, please. And we'll just rehearse those quickly, because those are foundation things for how we know our morality is shaped. Do we have that up? Okay, we'll just go over them until they get them, but G is for genetics, what we pass down, and I'm going to tell you, not everything is passed down to every child the same. And sometimes things skip a generation. And don't be surprised if you have a child that you think is your mother, because it skipped a generation. I have that with my daughter. I look at her and I think I want to be like her when I grow up, because she has a lot of qualities of my mother and my mother-in-law. And I don't have some of those qualities, but I see them in her, and I think they're beautiful. Family values is the F. Do we have that? Oh, there we go. And influences. Now, family values, that's where we want to really make sure that we put this here foundation from the Peaceful Solution as priority in our life, because everything else will be set around it, that our values are set on a foundation that is solid, and they'll always have security in that. Okay, so we have influences, and our influence is negative. Yes or no? Yes, our influence is positive or negative, right? They're both. So that's where you're going to teach your children as they grow up. Influence are all around you, everywhere. So you'll have to be aware if it's going to be positive or negative. And as you teach them growing up, they're going to watch you to see what your choices are going to be. Because if you're telling them one thing and choosing another, they'll see that too. So that's always a self-examination as a parent to see what we're teaching our children. And our experiences. And I think experiences are so important to making sure that they're positive, always positive, and joyful. I mean, I always told my children, I said, I don't care if you're a doctor, I don't care what you do in your life, I want you to be joyful. Because if you're joyful in your life, everything else you do, you're going to bring that joy along with it. So I think that being joyful is a very important thing. Choices, and that's where we really emphasize be careful what you choose. As you're teaching them as you grow up, and then you see where they're going to go off on their own for a little bit, you're going to make sure that you have that foundation set so that when they go out, the choices are going to be the ones that you've taught them, that you've helped them develop that stability within this here program to know that choices are very important. Even one bad choice can leave you in a very bad situation the rest of your life. So you really want to emphasize that with them all the while they're growing up. From the time they're in your womb to the time they're 35 years old, you're still going to be talking to them as not a child. And this is another thing I think is very important. When we have children, they're not really your friends. And not that you're not friendly with them, and not that you're not kind and helpful with them. You are. You have a closeness with them. But there's a difference between having them as your friend and having them your friend when they grow older. Because they're looking to you to help them and to guide them and to shape them. And if they think you have to be a friend to them, you might tell them things that will hinder them. Let me just tell you one thing. I've seen it where parents will share pretty much everything with their children. Difficulties, financial situations, struggles. That is putting too much on your children. And you don't know where that takes a child's mind, but I've seen it take a child's mind. When the child realized that they overheard their parents talking about the financial situation, they decided they wouldn't eat as much because they didn't want to put that burden on their parents. They started looking at themselves as a burden. Remember, your struggles are your struggles. Your children don't ever have to know that you had that struggle. But if they do, you might be putting too much in their mind to have to think about. You want to just teach them all the positive things. And when they get older, you can talk about those things. Like I do with my daughter. Do you know when you were little and this and this and this was going on? I didn't know that. I didn't know that you were going through that struggle. Well, I just want you to let you know that when you have children, you're not going to let them know you went through that struggle either. So it's very important that you have your things, they have theirs. You're all working together to get to where you both need to be. Your environment, and that's very important to make it. What kind of environment do you think is important? What do you think in a child's environment should be important? Can I have some input on this? And I want to let you know, input is very important in a class, and I surely appreciate it. It sure helps out in a class. So what do you think is important for a child to have in their environment to make them thrive and grow and excel? Anything? Here we go. We have a hand right here.
They need to have a structured environment and also a healthy environment. And I was thinking as the environment, not just only the location, but the things that are actually the activities that is going on around them day to day. So it needs to be healthy, structured, and positive.
Great. I agree. All those things are very important for a child. You have another hand back here? Yes.
I would say also security. The child, like you were saying, shouldn't be wondering when the next meal is coming. They shouldn't second guess their value or what am I willing to do for you as a parent. Mm-hmm. So that structure, as she said, is very crucial. But it does start with how we express ourselves. Turn it back to you.
Thank you. Yes, and another thing with meals, like I said, I never grew up ever thinking I wasn't going to get another meal. And even if you're going through a situation where you have to hold back on, making fancier meals, you can make those meals just as enjoyable. A beans and rice meal is just as enjoyable as any other meal if you're setting it forth before them in the right way. Yes, I have a comment back there.
A clean environment,
And why is that important, a clean environment?
because it teaches them that they should maintain themselves as they're growing up. It helps them to learn how to have that structure. Because if they're taught to clean, if they're taught to do these things, then they won't have to struggle with it later in life if living in a place that they don't want to be in. Because clutters the mind.
Well, thank you. I thank you for that. And it's very important. And children love to clean. It doesn't mean that they have to get it all clean, but they love to help. They love to get on the floor and take their little rag and their little pail and help wash up. Don't go after them and clean it until they're out of the room. And then you go and you clean the rest of that floor. But let them know they did a great job, and every time they're going to do it better. Yes.
I saw something recently where this doctor said that you can have an absolutely dumb as a skunk child, but if they're in an environment of success, they will succeed because that's what they were brought up in. And you can have a brilliant child brought up in an environment of failure. Nothing's going right, nothing ever goes right. And as brilliant as they are, they won't succeed because of the emotional environment they were brought up in. And yes, I believe we need to be clean, we need to be healthy, we need to eat right, but we need to, as you said, guard our emotions around our children. Because just like you, I said to one of my children, when we moved from here to there, and I told them what the circumstances were, they said, we had no idea. And I said, I'm glad, because I didn't want you to know. You didn't need to know.
Great. That's beautiful. That's another beautiful example. Yes. And do you see the power that we have as parents in what we can create? You've just allowed this human being to grow in your womb. You've given birth, and they're walking now. But all that while, all the things that you were putting in their minds, you see the effect and the power and the amazingness that you have of developing and creating this human being to be something that's of great benefit to society, great, joyful, all the positive things. Let's focus on those things and eliminate the negative, and we will have a society built on the peaceful solution that is like very awesome. Now, let's continue on here. When you teaching about love and learning in that next paragraph down, just going over how important it is to teach your children to learn to love, not to love to learn, so that it becomes part of their heart, which feeds their mind. Remember, the heart is if it's more joyful, it's going to accelerate and develop something more positive. And that down in that same chapter talks about taking walks with them to build your children's sense of excitement about life, seeing the amazingness of life. Nothing of fantasy can ever be as amazing as the way the earth has been made. Nothing can be as amazing as the ocean is deep and all the creatures that are in it. And when you really just put those real things in your children's life, that will be more than any make-believe story, fairy tales. You're putting real things in their life, and they're going to see the excitement in that. And to role model. Remember how important it is to role model. And if your child doesn't know how to do something, how to be compassionate, I talked about this in this next paragraph, to teach them by your example. If someone falls down and they don't quite know how to do it, run over to that person and start helping them. Just by you doing that, they're going to know, oh, that's what I should be doing. Because you can teach your children things on paper and out of books, but that doesn't really sometimes sink in how it is done physically in their eyes. So it's important to make sure that that gets done. Now we were down here learning about that hate is something that is learned. Now on the next overhead, this comes from acceptance, the page 24. Now we all remember how about this here. Okay, it might need to come down just a little. The equation of hate, about intolerance, inconsiderate, racism, discrimination, and hate, that all equals hate. And we see that in our society so much, but it's a taught thing. It's a very taught thing. I grew up in a all-white farming community. I mean, I don't know how old I was to even realize that there was anything but a white Catholic people. I just didn't know there was anything else out there. I don't know how old I was until I realized that, but it wasn't even talked about, or even, I'm sure I must have seen it, but it wasn't nothing that was emphasized, that people were people and you treat people because you treat them because that's the way you're supposed to treat them, with kindness, respect, especially the older people. It was really drilled in my mind as a child to respect the older people and to be mindful of them and their needs. So we need to be careful. It talks about here, ask yourself if you accept generalizations about groups of people and place them upon the individual. And even be careful to not place a label on someone just because you saw them one time do one thing, because that might have been so out of the norm of what they normally do. You don't know what the circumstances were. You don't know the struggles that were going on in their mind. And you don't even know how much they've worked to overcome that. Isn't that something? Sometimes, let me give you an example. You might see someone that's very obese. So you might put a generalization in there. But you know what? You don't know that they used to be 100 pounds, even heavier than that, and they've worked down to get to where they've gotten, and they're on a way to success because they're changing things in their mind. I've always said, because I've read it somewhere, and I don't know who I can even quote this from, but it said, it doesn't matter where you're standing right now. It matters in what direction you're going. So we don't know which way a person's going in their direction. They might have overcome a whole bunch of things to get there, and you think that they're just not trying in life, So we don't know. And when you teach your child that, don't judge someone on where you think they are at, because you just don't know. We can only do is encourage. So let's go on to page 27. And it says here, personally seek to embrace diversity by meeting people of different cultures, trying recipes from other nations. The world is filled with violence perpetrated by hate for others in different nationalities and ethnicities. This is where, we've seen a lot lately in the news about, Black people's lives matter. And I say, yes, that's true. And so, but we also need to tell our children and tell the world as members of the peaceful solution that people matter, life matters, animals matter, water matters, plants matter, everything matters. When we say it just as one, that's when the division comes in. So we have to make sure that if someone asks us, do you believe that Black lives matter? You need to make sure. I would tell my children, make sure to say, yes, I agree with that. But let me tell you, I think that all life matters. So not that they just think it's only for one kind of people, but for everyone. My compassion for human beings doesn't mean you have to fit into a certain category. It matters because you're a human being. You're a living being. So we need to always watch, make sure that we let our children know that that's how we look at things, so that there can be peace throughout this whole world. Does color have character? Yeah, it does. But it doesn't matter. It can have positive or negative. So but it doesn't, your character doesn't mean you're bad because you're one color or you're not that color. It's what we put in it. And that's what the peaceful solution is all about. That's what you're empowering your children with, is to let them know that all lives matter. That whatever character you choose, it doesn't matter where you came from. It matters what you're putting into yourself and how much you're trying to develop this character that will bring peace. Because it's building the peace in here, in your character, that's going to be building peace throughout the whole world. So by choosing to see the color of someone's character rather than the color of their skin, and appreciating them for whom they are, you can begin to teach your children to embrace diversity by doing so yourself. No one can say it better than that. The way that was written, no one can say that better than that. Be sure to model these same behaviors after your baby is born by exposing him to different cultures. And here in the Peaceful Solution community, we do have that perfect community where this is tested out, tried, and proven, because I have friends from the islands. They talk a little funny. No, we like to tease them about it and have fun with that. But, every area of the world you come in when we have our seminars, and you see people not focused on skin or what you're wearing or what things you've done in your life, but everybody in every situation is talking about how this program has changed their life, how this program has given them hope and a desire to become perfect in this program. And practicing this program is what's making you perfect. Doesn't mean you're going to get it right the first time, the millionth time, but the effort is going to be there. So we're going to teach our children this. We're going to teach them that to make their character golden. And that's the color we're going to focus on, a golden character. Teach your children, the next, on page 27, the second paragraph, teach your child the importance of helping and serving others. Talk to your child about the joy you get from taking care of her and helping others. Give your children age-appropriate tasks. Now, can you name some age-appropriate tasks for younger children that you wouldn't give like a teenager? What would you give a younger 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old? Yes, we have some hands up here.
Put your toys in the toy box.
Put your toys away when you're done. Yes. Next.
I would say cooking. My grandson always wants to help me cook since he was 9 months old. And obviously, you're not going to put a child by the stove that young. But there are things they could do, like mix it, put the seasonings in. And as they get older, they can graduate to the stove. I turn it back to you.
And that's really great, because you're saying, okay, yes, you can help. There are limits, but as you get older, they're going to see that you're going to trust them because you know that you have confidence in them, that now I've gone from just putting the salt and pepper in to I actually get to use, mix it up or put it in the blender and hit that button. So yes, that builds great confidence in a child, yes. Next.
I would say sweeping and helping to clean up when they make a mess.
That's great. Showing them accountability, responsibility, even as in a young one. Doesn't mean, like I said before, that they have to get it perfectly cleaned up. But just the fact that you're showing them that I'll help you clean this up, and you'll show them and get them to that point. Very important. And praising them the whole way that they're doing it. Wow, I know you made this mistake. It was an accident. You tipped over this pot of a plant, and now you're going to help pick this here soil back up. She has another comment. Can we go back there quickly? So it's a very important thing to, show them accountability and responsibility.
I have found that young children love yard work. Give them a rake, and I have a poor man's wheelbarrow. It's called a tarp, and we rake the debris onto the tarp. And I've seen children just work and enjoy themselves and be so pleased with themselves. And I have some also help me water plants. And they look forward to doing these things. They feel like they've been involved.
Mm-hmm. That they have a place, that they have an importance. You place importance on. Now, we don't want to give them so many responsibilities when they're little that they do feel that it's a burden. You're not going to make them clean up everything. But teaching them to love that work as much as they can do that. And if they're willing, it's going to pay off because I'm telling you, my daughter loved to cook. As she was little, I'd let her do a lot of things. By the time she was 10, she could make the whole meals. So you know what? It will pay off. So, and not only that, it was enjoyable the whole way around. I mean, watching her develop her skills and her confidence. And that's what you can give your children, that confidence to know that, you can do this. You're growing, you're developing, and now you want to try a recipe that I never cooked. Let her do it. Just let her do it. You'll be surprised at how amazing that they learn and they have that the feeling that they can. What was said before, when you put a child in an environment where they feel they can't, they won't. But when you put them in the environment where they can, they will. We just have to make that environment come alive in their lives. So continuing on in there, praise their efforts. Verbalize what a great help they are and how much you appreciate their hard work. And let them know, you are such a hard worker. I didn't know you could do all that. And you're just like, they're like, wow, I can do that. And you can see them getting a little taller. Just at that instant that you've made them a little taller. It's very important whenever you meet someone and you leave them, making them feel a little taller, not a little smaller. It's very important with your children, with everyone. As a child matures, so should his responsibilities. Continue to give appropriate tasks and never to fail to communicate how much you appreciate them. Your attitude should show that you appreciate how they're serving. And when you give children that, and you see the younger ones doing the little things, and as they get older, what do they do when they're teenagers that they can't do when they're little? Anyone have an example that once you start to become teenagers, what can they do then that you would not let them do when they're 4 years old or 5 years old? Any comments? I know one. I would let them mow the lawn. I would let them start helping mow the lawn, wash the car. Help them to realize that we are all a family, and that's what's so very great. When you sit down at that meal, everybody's contributed to that family. One took care of the animals. One was just done working in the garden. Some hauled the wood in. We have a comment over here. Some hauled the wood in. The little one helped you set the table. And you all had a part. And that's what makes us a family. Yes.
I think it's very important also to give them a budget and with their allowance, jobs that they do like the lawn or laundry or something like that. Teach them how to do a budget with that so that they would learn how to manage that money.
That's very great because I can tell you, thank you for that comment. But I can tell you one day I didn't want, but my children wanted something at this store, something for me to buy. And I said, we don't have money for that right now. And one of my little ones, just real little, said, yes, Mom, we do. And I said, why would you say that? Mom, and you have your checkbook, just write a check. So we don't, you don't realize the concepts your children don't know, but you know what, that really opened a great, and real little, it didn't have to know everything, but it was a time to explain to him that you can't just write checks. And when we got home, we did. We had a great conversation about, in order to write that check, you first have to put it in the bank. And you can't write it unless you have enough money in the bank. So we didn't have enough money in the bank. But yes, budgeting is very great. And teaching the children that just because you have a checkbook doesn't mean you have the finances to buy what you want to buy. So very important, because we've seen in society now how, I'm going to have to close now, but I know that there's a woman back there. While she's making her comment, and we'll listen very carefully to her comment, we're going to switch over to our next teacher, Hadassah. You can stay sitting because she's going to comment.
My grandson was about 3. He wanted me to get him some Sharpies because my daughter had a set of Sharpies. And he said, Grandma, can you buy me those markers? And I said, no, I can't, because you're only 3. He said, why? I said, you see the regular markers you have? You see how they're all over and I could wash those off? These don't wash off. I said, so when you're 12, I'll consider getting you some Sharpies. And with that, I turn it back to you.
Okay, let's see. Can you hear me? Yes, it works. Okay, that was a wonderful comment. Thank you so much. And before we get back into the lesson, let's give the first teacher a round of applause. She did an excellent job. And before I jump into the lesson, let's get a few questions to ask everyone. So, as you became parents, when you became a parent, were you automatically prepared for everything that came your way? Did you ace all of that? And you can give your answer by raising your hand. So let's see. No? Okay. What about this? After you learned the PSCEP solution and applied the parenting manual to your life, do you think you see a difference in your parenting for the better? Let's raise your hands. Okay. So I see some hands raised. And I just want us to keep in mind what we covered last week about education and knowledge being power. That the PSCEP solution has the ability to change the hearts and minds of all individuals, child and parent alike, and that you have the tools literally in your fingertips. And we talked about society and how they are lacking in morality, and that the parents literally are troubled because they don't know how to deal with their children's behaviors, their emotions, their mood swings, all of these things, because they don't have the answers, but you do. So never take that for granted. And we're going to continue on in opening here on page 27 about our children and the importance of helping and serving others. And I heard a lot of the feedback and how you all have wonderful children and you taught them things and they apply these things to their life, and even as adults, they can become better than you at it. And it's not it's not a bad thing that they are better than you. It just goes to show that you have poured a lot of time into training them. So we're continuing on here. It says, teach your child the importance of helping and serving others. And we talked a lot about how we have to praise their efforts. Now, a lot of times children, they don't like work or they don't like chores because in their mind it's punishment, and that just goes to show the parents. So sometimes parents give their children, based on the consequences for their actions, they give them work and chores and then they don't like it anymore. But I want us to keep in mind that work and chores help our child to learn responsibility. It helps them to learn what to do, what not to do, and it helps them in the future as well. And we want to keep in mind as well that a lot of times our children don't know why they're doing certain things, so they don't do it to the best of their abilities. Now, as a child, our mom always gave us a roster or like a chores list, and she put it on the microwave. And so 2 of her children followed through with the chores as written, but the third one didn't always follow through. He sometimes either did it half-heartedly or didn't do it at all. So one day she decided to ask him, why weren't you doing your chores? And he said, I don't know. And for my mom, I don't know answers don't cover it. She really wants to figure out what her child is thinking because they literally have thoughts in their mind. So she went and asked him, she said, do you know why I gave you these chores? And then he said no. And so she explains to him that the working and helping doing these chores helps her to get a lighter day. So when she wakes up early in the morning, she said, you see me waking up early in the morning, we go to work and I come back and sometimes I feel tired, and we see that. And then when you help me do these chores, it helps her to get a lighter day and also helps her to spend more time with us family-wise. So after that, he had a change in action, and then he started doing his chores more readily, and he's seen and found his place in the family. So when a child can figure out that they're not just a child, they don't do whatever they want, but as a family unit, their contribution actually helps, then they'll be more readily motivated to do their jobs. Okay, so it will say here, praise their efforts and verbalize what a great help they are and how much you appreciate their hard work. As a child matures, so should his responsibilities. And we talked about that. Different age ranges have different responsibility. And I just want to really zero in on praising their efforts, because a lot of times our praise, sometimes we think we do it so repeatedly that we kind of forget about praising our children. And that praise helps motivate them to continue on doing the work. So I wanted to think about something. So a lot of times you might see a child very early on, say 3, 4 years old, they draw a picture, they do a painting, they make something out of Play-Doh, and they go up to a parent or to an adult and say, hi, you seen this? What do you think about it? And so you can have two of one responses. One parent or one adult might say, that's a great job. What is it? And continue on, and they'll have to explain, this is mom sitting here, and this is the house, and this is the dog, and all these certain things. And they said, you're doing such a great job, continue on and doing it. And that was praising their efforts. Now, there are some who don't know how to praise the child's efforts, who might say, what is that? In a different tone of voice, and it's like, that looks horrible. It might actually go on and have a negative feedback on the child. And I just want to think about how two different responses can change a child's life. Because the first response, the child's like, I'm doing a great job, but I see how I'm falling short. I'm going to try tomorrow and try a little better. And then in the second response, we can see how they're like, oh, mom, dad didn't like it. There's no need for me to do art in the first place. And they might give up on that future that they might have had as an artist. So I just wanted to keep in mind that our feedbacks does make a difference in our child's life, and it can affect it for better or for worse. So even if, you can see room for improvement, someone taught me, what is it called? I want to say the sandwich technique. So whenever you're correcting a child, so to speak, you might say, okay, you did great at this. Let's say they're sweeping. You did a great job overall sweeping. Really great job. All the dust that I first seen is not there. And then in the middle, you can say, something you can work on are the little corners. A lot of times children miss the corners, right? You go on the corners, and ending off in that sandwich, you can say, well, let's try again tomorrow. And let's see your work. And that will help them, because you not only praised their efforts, but you also gave them another goal. And that goal will be for them to do tomorrow, and then they'll get better and better at it. And then you'll see how perfect they are at sweeping. And then you don't even want to sweep anymore because they're so great at it. So I just want us to keep that in mind, okay? Our praise is very important in a child very early on, especially. Okay, so we're going to moving on here, and it says here, be patient, loving, and caring when teaching. This holds true whether you are teaching your baby or your teenagers. And as we covered, a parent is a teacher no matter what age a child can be. But we can see how the roles might differ. So first, a child who's very small, the parent might have to walk behind the child, tell them the rules every once in a while, repeat it or so often. And then as they grow older, you can see how they're taking your teachings to heart, and they're applying it for themselves. So now they don't have to come and, say, well, mom, what do I do now? They'll know what to do, right? And then they'll get to the point, as we said, where they can trust you. And so now if they have a problem, they'll readily go to you first instead of you going to them. Hey, mom, I have this problem. What can I do? And you can talk about it together. And then not only are you giving your feedback, they're giving yours, and we have that communication lines, okay? So you want to keep in mind that it is never too young or too old to learn. And as parents, you're always a parent to your child, no matter how old they are, right? Okay, so point number 2, be prepared to repeat, because children learn through repetition. That is so very important, right? So you can say it, I know a lot of times people say, well, if I said it once, I said it 1,000 times. No, you have to keep saying it 1,000 times 70, right? And you'll continue on, and they'll finally get it into where they'll start telling you when you slip up. Like the first teacher said, a lot of times when we teach our child the correct ways, they'll get it, and then they'll see you slip up, and then you'll say, well, Mom, you didn't do that quite right. And then you, being humble and actually imitating what you're doing, right? You'll be humble and say, well, thank you for pointing that out to me. And then that'll be great. And that can actually help the both of y'all to continue on and growing and being more positive, right? Okay, point number 3. Young children and many older ones are often visual and tactile learners. And I want us to underline that. And tactile is relating to touch, to feelings. And there's actually 3 different types of learners. We have visual, we have auditory, and then we have the tactiles or the hands-on learners, right? So when teaching concepts, use creative ways to stimulate their senses. Pictures, songs, and rhymes are all great teaching tools. And I wanted to keep in mind, very early on in children's life, they have a lot of pictures. You need some Pictionaries, you have a lot of songs, rhymes, and all it's going to help them keep that within their minds. And then they'll grow up, and then you won't have to tell them the nursery rhymes anymore, right? So all those things help them. And sometimes you kind of have to get down to a child's level and think like a child to get into a mind of a child. So sometimes you'll be a little goofy and a little funny or whatever, and that'll help them learn, but then you have to be stern sometimes too. Okay, so we have point number 4. Be willing to explain choices and situations in your daily life from a moral standpoint. For example, explain to your 2-year-old child not to throw trash on the ground because we must keep the earth clean. And that just goes back to us talking about how we're teaching our child the importance of learning. We're always teaching our child not to talk down to them because they can actually understand what you're saying. They might not be able to give it back to you, but they'll get it. And then it says here, be willing to listen. A great teacher is also a great listener. No child should have to say, do you only see the bad things that I do? Don't you ever see the great things? And I want us to keep that in mind, really evaluate ourselves. How much times are we pulling up our child versus actually acknowledging them and praising them for their efforts? Because if one's overstepping or overbalancing, then we know we have to keep at it and overcome that. Okay, so we want to reference here for being willing to listen. The Building Moral Excellence on page 160, we talked about actively listening. And sometimes in order for us to actively listen, we have to just be quiet. I know sometimes as parents, we're just like, okay, they say one thing, want to say something back, but listen to their whole story out. And that will help you get it from their point of view, and then you'll be able to help them better with advice. Now, a quote that I've seen, and I really want us to talk, really want to note it here. It says, courage is what it takes. Courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is also what it takes to sit down and to listen. And I want us to keep that in mind, okay? Now, going on here, it says, your goal as a parent is not to produce a prodigy. And for a prodigy, we defined it before as a young person who is unusually talented, either in math or in piano or something that they're really, really great at. So your goal as parents is not to have a top-notch child, okay? That's not your goal. But it's to, as it says here, so what if a child could do calculus at the age of 7, yet is rude, disrespectful, and oppositional to his parents and everyone that he meets? And I want us to think about it. Would you rather have a child with a big heart or with a big brain? Okay, think about it really, because I can work with a child with a big heart because they're kind, they're compassionate, they listen, but children with big brains or who think they have big brains think they know everything, and it's very hard to teach them, right? So we have to keep in mind that our goal is not to have, the most smartest child out there, but to have a child who is a person of integrity, who can actually mark, and I say mark, or interacts with others, and you can see the lasting effect of those interactions versus you staying by yourself and, studying books or whatever. But it goes to show here that it says positive character traits must be instilled within their hearts and minds, and this is done through diligent, consistent teaching and role modeling positive moral character. When we talk about hearts and minds, we talk about internalizing it. Remember that word integrity, where it's the action of internalizing it, your positive character traits as seen by others. So you're actually showing people that you've learned a piece of solution and that you applied it to yourself, and now you can make a difference in the world. Okay, so we are going to really quickly look at that picture. So a lot of times we have pictures in the Peace Solution books, and we want to really internalize those too. So we have a little dad, and he's, laying down, and the little boy is giving the dad something. And the dad says, "Thank you, son." So what do you think the father is teaching in this moment? Because a lot of times our teaching isn't a class setting, but it's our actions. So in this moment, what do you think the father is teaching or imitating to the boy? Okay, with your hand way in the back.
Respect.
Yes, respect. Okay, we have one more hand. And sometimes we can teach more than one thing at once, right? So we have respect.
By saying thank you, I see that he shows gratitude and appreciation.
Gratitude and appreciation. And a lot of times, some adults don't feel the need to say thanks to children. So this is showing that no matter anybody that you come across to, you can show respect to, be it a child who you would think is lower than you, right? Or even to an adult. So we want to keep that in mind, okay? So it's teaching to be polite, to be respectful, appreciation, gratitude, and so much more. So we're going to turn back to LP for, let me get this right, LP4A, LP4B. Okay, LP4B, procedure 4. And it says, have students answer the critical thinking questions at the top of page 28. Discuss answers as a class and explain that our character, whether positive or negative, develops as a result of both great and bad experiences and interactions. And I want us to get that. It's not only the great experiences, but also the bad experiences mold our character. Now that we know the importance of a moral character, we can guard our children's environment and carefully teach positive character development. So we're going to turn over to page 28 here. And in our box here, we have a little definition for teach. And it's defined to communicate skills or knowledge, to give instructions or insight, to train and to instruct. And we also want to reference page 25 for a definition there as well, because we talked about teaching is to give or share knowledge so that someone else can learn. So we have two definitions there. Now the critical thinking, I want us to all think about this. Were you taught how to develop a moral character as a child? Now, back in the earlier years, it probably wasn't moral character defined as our names, but probably morals. So what morals were you taught as a young child that you can see that you've developed and taught to your child today? And these are things that are like little nuggets that maybe your grandparents told you or your mom told you that helps actually direct your actions today. Go ahead.
Well, there are two things. One is basic social skills, greeting one another properly. You always address the adults by their name and proper conduct that way. And the second one is honesty is the best policy.
Okay, she gave us two great ones. So honesty is the best policy, and also to interact with everyone you meet with respect, especially like our first teacher said, the elderly. Those are people that you should actually respect and deeply. Go ahead.
To treat others as you want to be treated.
Yes, the golden rule. Treat everyone the way you want to be treated. And that first start with you. So you have to ask yourself, how do you want to be treated? How do you treat yourself? And then you can treat others in the same way, positively.
To finish any job or assignment that you're given to the best of your ability, whether it's like a chore or just any obligation that you're responsible for, like do it all the way right the first time.
Okay, that was a lot that she just said, but it helps with our working, right? So she said to treat others, no. She said to fulfill a job as we're told to do it the right way the first time, and no matter how long it takes, because sometimes our instructions aren't always as crystal clear, and so we might have to go back and forth to our parents. Mom, you told me to do this. Do I do this way, that way? Okay. well, maybe I'll try it this way, you do it wrong. So you come back and you can go back and forth. But at the end of it, you do it the right way. And hopefully the first time is easier. You don't have to go back as much times. But that's really great for worth ethic, teaching your child that. Okay, anyone else? What are some morals you've been taught?
My father always said, let your word be your word. Don't go back on it. And if you can't do it, don't make a promise by saying yes.
That's a great one. Let your word be your word. And if you made a promise, follow it all the way through. Okay, so I'm going to throw some out there and tell me what you think it means. Don't judge a book by its cover. So I'm in the library and I see a book. Is that what it's talking about? I see this book. It looks really dusty and old and teared up. But it looks like a lot of people used it. So I'm going to read it. And it ended up being a great book. No, seriously. When you hear that saying, don't judge a book by its cover, I mean, sometimes when you're looking for stuff, of course, don't look at it the first way you look at it. But what else does that mean? How else would you internalize that?
We shouldn't judge by the appearance of the person. You know, they might look like they're well-dressed and very educated, but in reality, they could be kind of sly and deceitful. At the other hand, the person could be very humble-looking, very meager clothes, might not speak properly, but they might be very trustworthy and responsible.
Okay, so it wasn't talking about books, everyone. It was talking about people. So don't judge the people by their appearance only, because sometimes, like she said, that you might see a person who look well-dressed, you know, real clean, they clean up real nice, and they could not be the person that they say they are, so dishonest. And then you have those who are rough around the edges, probably a country bumpkin, like they say, but they're pretty cool people, okay? And I had to learn that. And I always tell people, I mean, especially with children, sometimes they look at how someone's dressed or how they come to school and say, well, I'm not going to be friends with her because she dresses this way. You have no idea what such a treasure that person might be. So I really tell them, figure out who they are, talk to them. That first interaction might be the click. And then after a while, you'll really have this person from thick and thin through everything. We have a hand in the back.
I'm glad the direction you're taking this comment, because you would probably be surprised at how literally children take what you say. So when you say things to them, you may have to ask them, what do you think I mean? Because, you know, I've gone along and said things over and over and realized children took it so literally that we were like coming from two different planets.
I know exactly what you mean. I had to teach a class once, and I told them we're going to talk a little bit about literature. So it's raining cats and dogs. Everyone looked outside. No, I'm not even kidding you. And I'm like, okay, that means it rains really, really hard, okay? They're like, oh. So remember, whatever you say, explain it to the children, right? Okay, so that's a really great point, though. So explaining everything, asking them what it means, repeating it over and over and over again, but one time they will get it, right? Okay, so what about this? I'm chewing up my words before I spits them out. I don't know how great that is. So like, I am going to. Okay, I don't know. Okay, so someone tell me what that means to them. Chewing up your words before you spits them out. Spit them out. You have a hand over here.
It means thinking about what you have to say before you say it.
Yes, so plain and simple. Thinking about whatever you say before you say it. Will this thing I say hurt someone? Will it lead them to tears? Is it going to be kind? Would I want the same thing said about me? So we really want our children to start thinking. Okay, so there's a few more morals that you've been taught. How about two wrongs make a right. Is that right? I think so. Am I driving? Am I take two rights? Okay, two wrongs, two lefts. I don't know. Okay, but two wrongs never makes a right. It's what we want our children to understand. So if someone does something bad to you, do not retaliate, no matter how hard it takes to control yourself. Do not retaliate. Go to the proper authorities, and it'll be dealt with, right? Okay, there's a few more. Ooh, don't jump to conclusions. That is a great one. Don't jump to conclusions. Gather all the facts first. So you have to become educated. You have to go every single source possible before you actually settle that matter. Okay, so these are all things that you have learned, and you've actually learned positive character education way before you thought you have. So these things have guided your lives, right? So we're going to continue on here, and we're going to turn actually back to LP 4B, Procedure 5. Okay, Procedure 5. Choose volunteers to read the first 3 paragraphs under the heading Your Role as a Provider on page 28. Discuss the importance of providing a child with his physical and emotional needs as well as examples of positive moral character. Have class answer the think about it questions on page 29 and then discuss as a class. Explain that besides providing children's basic needs, educating them in moral principles will give them a firm foundation on which to develop positive character. So we're going to turn back to page 28. And before we read that first paragraph, as parents, what are some things that you must provide for your children? And before you raise your hand, food, shelter, and clothing is out of the question. Those 3 we know we need to provide for our children, okay? We covered that way before. I mean, your parents provided it for you. I mean, so we know that. But what's next?
Education.
Education. That's a great one. And why do we need education? Why do we need to educate our children? Are they not born with all the knowledge they need to take on the world? I think I have a hand down.
Yeah, I would say positive attention, because the child could be misbehaving to get your attention. And if you run and give them the attention they're seeking without correcting the behavior, they're going to think it's okay to continue in that pattern. So it's just one of those things that you have to really get down to the root of it and ask them, why are they behaving that way? And what it is that they really truly want. Because throwing yourself on the floor or items across the room because they're not feeling well, whatever it might be, you have to set that pattern where they know how to seek the proper attention. I turn it back to you.
That is a great one. So children are attention seekers. Is that not true? They are. Okay. So they're seeking attention, and sometimes parents, we don't give it to them when they want it. So like you said, they might throw some tantrums, yell, scream, and then you give them a hug and everything, and it's all calmed down. No, as the person who's giving the answer said, we have to deal with the issue first. So a lot of times you might ask them, why are you doing that? And sometimes you get the I don't know again. So sometimes it takes more than just asking them, but looking at their actual behaviors over time. Why do they explode? Why do they get angry? And then you'll figure out what's wrong. So proper, positive attention is what we want to give them. Mm-hmm.
I like the word compassion, and they're seeking affection. I think it better explains what a child needs rather than attention. Although attention is involved in it, but if we come at the idea that they're needing compassion and consideration and care, we can properly deal with the situation better and give them what they're needing, figure out what's wrong, because as human beings, we all need that. But when we look at it as attention, it's so surface, it doesn't really get down to the core, which is we all need affection, consideration, care, and concern. And we think from that angle, I think we're better prepared to give them what they need.
Okay, so we have the people who need affection. All children need affection. They need to be loved. They need to know what love is. And sometimes they, throw a fit over that as well. Anyone else? what are some things that as providers we need to give to our children? Okay, last hand.
Now, this has been mentioned before, structure. I have found that depending on the age of the child, if you have a written schedule where they can see it, then they know what time it is. Even if they can't read it, if you say, oh, the schedule says it's time for lunch, or it's time for a bath, it's playtime, then they've got something to look forward to, and they're not, like you said, throwing a tantrum. Okay, this is what time it is. Granted, everything is subject to change, in that if the need arises, maybe we'll put lunch off for 10 minutes and deal with this. You fell and scraped your knee. Okay, so we'll deal with this, and then we'll have lunch. But when they have a schedule, first of all, it helps me so much. I don't want to be in the middle of a batch of biscuits and you say, come on, we're going to the grocery store. Let me know ahead of time, and I will either make the biscuits later or I'll finish sooner so that I'm not frustrated. And children are the same. If they know that it's playtime or it's nap time, they'll finish up their play and head to their nap place. It's going to take a few times to get them structured, but they'll know, oh, it's time for a nap. Mom's going to read me a story. So if they can see that and get a routine going, then their life isn't chaotic. Mm-hmm. And just like mine isn't. I've even had a fellow teacher tell me, give them time limits. 5 more minutes and we're coming in. Children don't have watches. It may not be 5 minutes. It may be 2. But they got their mindset to start cleaning up and start getting prepared to come in. So these types of things help give them structure, and I think it gives them peace.
Thank you so much. So that structure is very necessary, and teaching your children time management will help them to accomplish much more than them disorganized and trying to figure things out. So we are out of time, but as we close, I want us to think about that. As providers, what do we need to give to our children in order for them to not only survive, but to flourish and grow and become model citizens, adults, and be successful in life, okay? And with this will be our closing.